Hey everybody, thanks for stopping back in at the Red Barn. In the last episode, you saw us get started on the 914 Ferrari intake manifold, and in this episode, we're going to keep chipping away and see how far we can get. Okay, with this in place, we talked about this stuff last time, and one of the things I mentioned was this air oil separator. One of the things to note is it's about 3/8 of an inch off of where it actually needs to sit. So this is high. And the reason is it's got to get pressed down in there. There's a seal, and I don't like doing that because occasionally I remove this. But I was concerned that this was too high to stow the targa top. And I figured, well, I wonder if it really is. So I grabbed myself a spare targa top. Now, I'm missing a bunch of the pieces because I cut the firewall out and all that. But if I put this thing in here, approximately where it lives, there are little rubber clips that fit in here and grab the back edge of this. And then there is normally the sheet metal, the front of the sheet metal trunk has clips on it, and this edge of the roof slides into the clips. But here's what's interesting. It clears the plenums, plus or minus, and I'm going to stuff the camera under here and see if you can see it. But it clears the air oil separator. Now, I am going to guess that you can say, wait a second, that may be actually touching it. And I would tell you it may actually be touching it, but that's part of what's going on here is it's also sitting down on the fender, inner fender here, which it won't do in real life. So I know it sits a bit higher than this. So the amazing cool thing about today's discovery is I don't need to mess with that air oil separator. It'll work right here the way it sits. And if I remove the top, I'm just going to set this aside for now. I can run a tube right across here, which will both help. I mean, this is obviously taking up a bunch of the removed strength. But if I ran like a 1x1 tube here, but what this will allow me to do is be the basis for some sheet metal that comes up and supports the trunk seal. And with that sheet metal here and coming down to here, I can then come maybe back to here and then drop my trunk down, just like I plan to do. And I will end up with a really nice stowage area, as well as, there's all kinds of stuff going on here today. This is the factory Ferrari water filler for the radiator system, overflow tank, etc., etc. So with the throttle bodies here, I'm still playing around with stuff, but they're going to be angling downhill. Maybe I'll come over to this side because I think it's actually going to be on this side. Remember now, the throttle bodies are going to be coming down at an angle out of here, but likely there'll be plenty of room to mount this right about in here and probably use the airbox as the basis for its, it's got a little mounting set of mounting legs. So I can get to the water filler, and this clears the engine lid and all that good stuff, and it could bolt right to the top of the airbox, maybe. So the other option is, if I did my bars here where I mentioned, there's plenty of room to mount something like this here. And it's still the highest point in the system. So I've got a couple of options for where this can go. The other thing I mentioned was this thing. This is the factory vacuum accumulator that runs everything that's air vacuum operated. The flapper valve in the center of the plenum, it operates the valve system at the tops of the intake runners. It operates the sport exhaust mode. Those are also vacuum driven valves. So this has got to get mounted somewhere. So again, depending upon orientation, if I have that bar coming across here, there's a bunch of places where things can be hidden underneath this sheet metal, which could be nicely decorated. We'll see. But anyway, this is not small. that water inlet is not small. And this has got to go someplace. So this all starts, I think it's starting to come together. I'm starting to like what I'm seeing. And we've got some ideas for the bump up. You can see maybe that the paint's been cleared away, to start looking at how we're going to get these turn downs on there. So far so good. And now the design is essentially landed upon. We go to work on the fabrication part. I'm waiting on some parts that are going to allow me to continue on with the modifications to the side-mounted throttle bodies. And so instead of just sitting around, I figured I would go after something else I'm excited about, which is the fact that the targa roof looks like it's going to fit in here. And the only way to get it completely nailed down is if I can actually get the mounts for the roof back into the car, or the mounts for the storage of the roof back in the car. And in order to do that, I needed to get the front firewall figured out, because these locations here are where those clips go on that hold the front of the roof when it's being stowed. So I went and grabbed the trunk section that I had cut out earlier and removed the floor, because there's obviously no way that's going to fit in here. But how funny is this? How interesting funny is this? If I had never cut this out, it looks like everything would have worked out almost great. Yes, I will need to clearance it to clear the backs of the plenum, but you know, I could never have known this was going to be the way it was going to go, because remember the plenums originally, or the throttle bodies, were going to be back here. So the plan was really never to have this. But now with the manifold flipped around, it looks like this is going to be a great idea. Now I'm not going to put this back in here, because at the end of the day, I want this whole, I'm going to call it a trunk liner. I want this whole set of sheet metal, whatever shape it ends up being, to be able to be removed for serviceability. Those of you that have ever worked on 914s know that, you know, if this is in here, the only way you can get to the motor is through the engine grill. And while this is a lot simpler to get to than the 4-cylinder 914 motor, or even a 6, just the idea that you could take this all out of here and have access to everything is too attractive for me to do that. So I think what has to happen is I am going to take advantage of the parts car, which has a completely intact trunk firewall, whatever you want to call this part. This is the physical clip location. So what I think I'm going to do is try to make a jig or a fixture of some kind that, I don't know what it's going to bolt to. You know, maybe it'll be something that maybe bolts across the tops of the shock towers and has something that comes forward and locates on this and then ties together. But to make a fixture to pick up these points on each side, so I can locate where this is, that'll also locate this part of the trunk seal. This is where the trunk seal actually goes. Now remember, this is all gonna have to get notched back to meet, you know, however the trunk gets reshaped. But this will allow me to get this portion of the setup figured out, and then work out some sheet metal. Maybe we'll go back to doing some other stamping dies to come up with, you know, an attractive panel that looks a little more modern than just the factory 914. But there we go. So next thing to do is going to be try to go after figuring out how to make that front part of the firewall, you know, and then am I going to do something that comes back at this level? Because remember, now I gotta protect this thing, because this can't be just living in the trunk with, you know, any kind of oil, you know, fumes. And by the way, those of you that don't know, this is the air oil separator, but it's also the cap and the dipstick for checking oil level in the car. And one of my favorite parts about it, by the way, is when this is all tightened up, it actually clocks the Ferrari perfectly, so when you're standing by in the car, it's completely aligned. It's all those kinds of little details. Oh, and plus I'm going to have some, you know, lines that go through and get to the motor and all that. That's relatively simple enough to do. There's also the big oil feed line, you know, over here that's going to have to go through the floor or through the wall or something like that. So there's some things to work out. Okay, enough talk. Let's do some real work. What I'm doing here is, because of the notch we have to put in the trunk lid to clear the plenums, I have to remove this structure, which is what helps keep the shape of the trunk. So with this removed, this surface is going to try to flatten out. It's upside down, obviously, but so I'm going to tack a 1x1 across that dimension just to hold that in place when this piece is cut out. And then obviously once we figure out exactly where it needs to go, I'll have to remake a support structure to frame that. But for now, this is going to keep it in place and give us a better representation of what the shape's actually going to be, even though that brace is cut out. And with that clearancing done and the trunk lid bolted back on, here we go. So you can see that it doesn't really need this much clearance, and it really is going to depend on what starts to happen out here with how much of a bulge we need to cover the throttle bodies and where this opening might be and having it look to scale. But in general, I think that's pretty cool. It doesn't look completely out of place to have that notch there, which is encouraging. I was worried that it was going to really dramatically change the way the car looks, but it doesn't. It looks like, hey, there's a bulge in there and it needs to have space to be there. And so, yeah, what the mistake I made was setting this down on the trunk and not realizing that it had this much angle here and that this could be a little bit closer. It could probably come in a ½ inch and it might look a little, a little tighter, which I think may make it look a little more professional. That's just me. And then obviously as it swings up, it needs to clear, but that's not going to be a problem at all. You can see that it's got plenty of clearance. And then there's the little support bar that's just temporary to keep the hood in shape whilst all this fitting is going on. So there you go. A little more progress. And now once the throttle bodies are attached to the plenum, we'll know exactly what we're dealing with and can start shaping this. Because you can see this is sagging because it's been cut. And given how much that it can move, obviously that much clearance isn't going to work. So this is going to have to get taken up to completely allow no interference. And then once the throttle bodies are in here, that means that bulge is going to have to be a bit more outboard. So we'll see. But that's the fun, isn't it? It's always the fun. More stuff to think about. This is the vacuum accumulator I mentioned earlier. It's 5 inches wide and it's about 10 inches long. That's a pretty big thing to fit into an already cramped area. If I could get rid of this, I think that would be a super cool idea. And that got me to thinking. Those of you that have followed the LS build know how much I love all the electronics whiz-bang stuff. And that got me thinking about, why don't I replace all this vacuum stuff with servo actuators, linear actuators, servo driven. This is the underside of the manifold, the intake manifold, and this is the actuation device for the valves at the top of the intake runners, right? You can see what happens when vacuum gets applied to this, right? Vacuum pulls this in, and these two arms actuate those valves and open them up. The other thing that this intake manifold has is there's another thing going on up here that you haven't seen because it's been removed from the plenum we're working with just to keep things safe. But this is the actuator for this flapper valve. So one of the things, as near as I can tell from people I've talked to, this just opens. There's no, at a certain RPM, it just says vacuum on and boom, it opens. And the same thing with the top valve. I'm not saying I'm going to try to outsmart the Ferrari engineers, but once we get this thing running and on the dyno, if this is electronically actuated, I don't just have to open it and have an on or off position. I could open it over time. Same thing with the top. So we could play with how much open this gets and how much open the middle thing gets while it's on the dyno, and we can tune this to optimize the intake manifold. So I think that's where I'm going, because more than just being able to do that, I get rid of all this stuff. I get rid of all the vacuum lines. How tidy will that be without having all of this stuff going on the car? So that's where I'm going with this. And there's just a ton of stuff to do on this car. And here I am trying to figure it all out and get it done. So thank you for your patience. I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I think I'm going to wait till next time to get back into actually doing some real work. This has been a lot of talk, and it gives you a glimpse into at least how I approach this fabrication and build thing. Is I just kind of look at it, see it, work through it, make decisions, and hopefully those decisions stick and I don't have to go too far backwards and redo things. But as you know, I end up going backwards and redoing things sometimes. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care. See you next time. Bye-bye.